Hey man, there is a particular cruelty in the way many women leave men, and it's not always about the act of leaving itself, but how it's done. A man invests his time, energy, loyalty, and often his very identity into the relationship, and yet when she decides to go, it's rarely quiet, rarely gentle. Instead, it's often cold, detached, almost surgical in its execution. She withdraws affection long before her words confirm it, making him feel like he's slowly bleeding out without knowing why. When she finally delivers the verdict, whether through silence, indifference, or blunt words, it feels brutal because of the contrast. The woman who once looked at him like he was her world, now looks at him like he's a stranger. That shift cuts deeper than any insult, because it's not just rejection, it's erasure. What makes it cruel isn't only the fact that she leaves, but that she often leaves at the very moment he's most invested. She doesn't go when things are bad, she leaves when he believes everything is fine. While he's planning a future, she's planning her exit. While he's saving for them, she's saving her feelings for someone else. And when the hammer drops, it shatters not just his present, but his entire sense of reality. He's left questioning every smile, every I love you, every promise she made, wondering how long she had been drifting away while he was still anchored to her. That betrayal isn't always in the leaving itself, it's in the deception, in the way she let him believe he was secure while secretly plotting her escape. One of the darkest truths men learn is that women often leave emotionally long before they leave physically. By the time she says the words, "I don't love you anymore," she has rehearsed them 100 times in her mind, built up her courage, and often already found emotional comfort elsewhere. To him, it's brand new. To her, it's old news. That's why her tone feels cold, her delivery feels indifferent, her demeanor feels cruel, because she's not grieving in the moment like he is. She's already processed it, already detached, and while he's just beginning to drown, she's already learned how to swim away. That asymmetry of timing is what makes it feel so heartless. She's months ahead in healing, while he's just been hit by the truck. Another reason women seem cruelest when leaving is that they strip away empathy in order to justify their decision. To leave cleanly, she often convinces herself that he doesn't deserve her sympathy, that he won't change, that he'll be fine. She hardens her heart because softness might pull her back in. So the compassion he once knew from her evaporates, replaced by a blunt indifference that feels alien. The same woman who once stayed up late comforting him now won't even return a text. The one who once kissed his wounds now won't acknowledge his pain. And for him, that whiplash is devastating, because it's not just losing her love, it's losing the part of her that once cared whether he lived or fell apart. But perhaps the cruelest part of all is that many women rewrite history as they leave. To ease their own guilt, they paint him as the problem, magnify his flaws, and downplay his efforts. She tells her friends he was controlling or boring or inattentive, even if he gave her everything he had. She convinces herself that the relationship was never what she wanted, that she outgrew him, that he was holding her back. And hearing this, or even just sensing it, shatters him more than the breakup itself. Because now, not only has she taken away the present and the future, she's also tainted the past. The love he thought they shared is recast as a mistake in her story, leaving him feeling like everything he lived, everything he gave, was worthless. When a woman leaves, she often slips into an armor of detachment, and for the man left behind, that armor feels like cruelty. But for her, it's a form of survival. She knows that if she allows herself to feel too much sympathy, she risks being pulled back into the very bond she's trying to escape. So she shuts off, not because she's heartless, but because she fears the gravity of his pain will pull her back into orbit. But from his perspective, that shut-off looks brutal, like a switch has been flipped. One day she was warm, affectionate, and caring, and the next she's cold, mechanical, almost unrecognizable. That kind of rapid detachment feels crueler than anger, because anger at least shows feeling. Indifference, however, feels like annihilation. Men often mistake this emotional detachment for hatred, but hatred would mean she still cares enough to burn. The truth is harsher. She's numbed herself to avoid falling back into the comfort of what they had, and that numbness, while protective for her, is devastating for him. He pours his heart out, begging for another chance, apologizing, making promises, hoping his vulnerability will stir hers. But she doesn't flinch. She looks at him with eyes that used to soften and now remain stone. That disconnect creates a surreal cruelty, because he still sees her as the woman he loves, while she is already disassociated from being his partner. It's not hatred, it's a void, and a void feels colder than fire. Her cruelty also comes in the timing. Women rarely leave without a parachute. many already have someone or something waiting for them. While the man is left alone, broken, and scrambling to pick up pieces, she often appears to land softly, whether that's in a new man's arms, in a circle of friends, ready to rally, or in a lifestyle shift she's been quietly preparing. This contrast in recovery adds insult to injury. He's wrecked, she's radiant. He's mourning, she's moving. He's stuck in shock, she's already living her next chapter. That disparity is not because she's stronger, it's because she's been preparing while he's been blind. And that preparation makes her departure feel far crueler, because it highlights how long she's been playing a different game. What deepens the cruelty men feel is that women often go silent on the very questions men need answers to. He wants closure, explanations, reasons. He wants to know when she stopped loving him, why she didn't tell him sooner, what he could have done differently. But most women won't provide those answers, not because they don't exist, but because speaking them would make leaving harder. Silence becomes her shield, but for him it's torture. He's left replaying every moment, inventing scenarios, blaming himself for things he never did. The absence of answers is often more painful than the breakup itself, because it forces him into an endless spiral of what-ifs with no resolution. Her silence might protect her, but it crucifies him. And then there's the cruelest illusion of all, that she seems happier without him. In the weeks after leaving, many women project joy, posting pictures, showing off their new life, laughing louder than usual, all to convince themselves and others that they made the right choice. For the man who loved her, seeing this is like being stabbed while still bleeding from the wound. He gave everything, and now she appears to be thriving without him. What he doesn't realize is that this is often just another act, a mask to cover her own turmoil. But in the moment, it feels like betrayal stacked upon betrayal. Because nothing feels crueler than realizing the person you would have given your life for seems to be celebrating your absence. One of the harshest realities men face is that women sometimes intentionally make their exit more painful. They don't soften the blow, they sharpen it. They act cold, dismissive, even cruel. Not always because they hate you, but because they know if they leave the door cracked, you'll chase, beg, and plead. By being cruel, they make the separation cleaner for them. She wants you to stop fighting, to stop convincing, to stop trying to resurrect what she already buried months ago. So she hardens her heart and sometimes even exaggerates her coldness, just so you'll stop. To a man, this feels like unnecessary brutality. But to her, it's survival. It's how she ensures she doesn't get pulled back into something she's decided to end. There's also the cruel way she reframes her love. She might tell you she never loved you, or that she loved you but wasn't in love with you. Words designed to cut deep and leave scars. But most of the time, these aren't the literal truth, they're rationalizations. She did love you, but her emotions shifted, and in order to justify leaving, she convinces herself and tries to convince you that the love wasn't real or wasn't enough. This is why so many men walk away feeling like the entire relationship was a lie. It wasn't a lie, it just no longer fit her emotional reality. But instead of owning the complexity, she simplifies it into something that sounds cruel and final, leaving the man to wrestle with doubts about every kiss, every promise, every memory. Another layer of cruelty comes from the swiftness with which women detach after the exit. While the man often mourns slowly, grieving, processing, reliving the moments, women sometimes appear to skip those stages altogether. One day she's in your arms, the next she's living as if you never existed. For a man, this is disorienting. He thinks, how can she be fine while I'm shattered? Did I mean nothing? But in truth, she's not skipping grief. She's already grieved silently for months while still with you. By the time she physically leaves, she's already emotionally gone, and that's why it feels so cruel. He's just starting a process she already finished. Some women, to further justify leaving, will exaggerate your flaws and downplay your strengths. They'll focus on the one or two areas you fell short, ignoring the countless ways you showed up. This selective memory helps her feel righteous about walking away. But for the man, it's cruelty in its rawest form. He dedicated himself to her, sacrificed, gave, and yet in the end, he's remembered not for the thousands of things he did right, but for the handful of things he did wrong. That selective blindness destroys him because it feels like his love was invisible, that no matter how much he gave, it wasn't seen, wasn't valued, wasn't remembered. This cruelty isn't always intentional though, it's often instinctual. Women are guided by emotion, and when their feelings shift, their loyalty shifts with them. What feels like cold calculation to a man is often just her natural emotional rewiring. She no longer feels what she once did, so she no longer acts the way she once did. To her it's natural, to him it's betrayal, and therein lies the gap. Men assume consistency is proof of love, while women assume feelings are proof of love. So when the feelings die, she acts as if the love never existed. That emotional logic feels cruel to men because it invalidates all the years, the effort, the devotion that was rooted in something far deeper than temporary emotion. The cruelty sharpens in the way women often protect themselves by demonizing the man they're leaving. Instead of admitting she simply fell out of love, she paints him as the villain. She tells herself and others that he was controlling, boring, emotionally unavailable, or unworthy. Even if these criticisms are exaggerated or outright false, they give her the justification she needs to sleep at night. For him, though, it's unbearable. He devoted himself to her, only to watch her rewrite their history in ways that make him the bad guy. And because people often believe the woman's side of the story, he's left not only abandoned, but misrepresented, carrying scars no one else sees. And yet there's a paradox here. The cruelty in her leaving often hurts more than the leaving itself. The breakup wounds him, yes, but it's her indifference, her rewriting of history, her coldness, and her swiftness in moving on that devastate him to the core. Men are logical. They want closure. They want reasons. They want the story to make sense. But women often leave in ways that make no logical sense because their decisions are emotional, not rational. And that mismatch creates agony. He's left trying to solve an equation where half the numbers don't exist. And in that desperate search for answers, he drives himself deeper into pain. Many women, when leaving, also employ silence as a weapon. They stop responding, stop explaining, stop engaging. Silence for them is an escape from the endless cycle of pleas and bargaining. But for the man, silence is cruelty at its peak. He's left drowning in his thoughts, begging for words that will never come. And the absence of those words cuts sharper than insults ever could. Silence makes him question his worth, his reality, even his sanity. Because when someone you loved with everything refuses to even acknowledge you, it feels less like rejection and more like annihilation. The cruelest irony of all is that women rarely understand the full extent of the pain they cause. They think their leaving is a personal decision, something they need to do for themselves. But for the man, it's a total collapse of his world. He doesn't just lose her, he loses his identity, his sense of security, his vision of the future. And because she leaves with such detachment, she never truly sees the depth of his devastation. She moves on believing he'll be fine, that he'll recover quickly, not realizing that for him, it's a trauma that lingers for years, sometimes decades. And this is why so many men emerge from heartbreak, hardened, cautious, and deeply mistrusting of women. The cruelty of her leaving doesn't just scar him, it reshapes him. He vows never to open up so deeply again, never to invest so blindly, never to trust so fully. The irony is that the cruelty she used to protect herself ends up creating a ripple effect that changes how he loves forever. He becomes guarded, detached, maybe even bitter, not because he was naturally that way, but because her leaving carves something out of him that will never grow back. Even when she believes she's done nothing wrong, her actions carry an echo of cruelty because of the contrast they create. Contrast between the woman she was when she loved him and the woman she becomes when she leaves. He remembers her softness, her warmth, her laughter in their shared moments. And then suddenly, he's faced with a version of her who won't return his calls, who looks at him like he's invisible. That emotional whiplash is its own kind of cruelty, because it forces him to confront not only the loss of her, but the loss of the version of himself that existed when she loved him. He feels erased from his own history. Sometimes her cruelty isn't in what she does, but in what she doesn't do. She doesn't comfort him, doesn't reassure him, doesn't ease the blow. She leaves him to bleed out emotionally, alone, while she carries on with her life. For a man who spent years being her protector, her provider, her rock, the absence of even a shred of mercy feels devastating. He thinks, after everything I gave, you couldn't even leave me gently? That lack of compassion haunts him, not because he expected her to stay, but because he expected her to acknowledge the gravity of what they shared. To make matters worse, women often underestimate how long men hold on to pain. Women grieve early and often recover faster, while men suppress and then explode much later. So when she leaves cruelly, she moves on quickly, while he stays stuck in mourning. Years later, she may barely think of him, while he still remembers the coldness in her eyes, the day she left. That imbalance feels crueler than anything, because he lives with a scar long after she's forgotten the wound even existed. Her cruelty, though, can sometimes be the very thing that saves him. Because when a woman leaves with coldness and indifference, it strips away all illusions. If she left softly, he might chase her for years, hoping for reconciliation. But when she leaves cruelly, it forces him to face reality. It hurts more in the moment, but it also severs the bond more cleanly. Over time, he comes to realize that her cruelty was also her confession. If she could discard him that easily, she was never truly his to begin with. And in that harsh truth, he finds the clarity to move forward. The cruelty also teaches him a lesson he'll never forget. Love must be given with caution. He learns that devotion doesn't guarantee loyalty, that sacrifice doesn't guarantee appreciation, and that effort doesn't guarantee love. It's a brutal education, but it shapes him into someone sharper, wiser, and less naive. The cruelty of her leaving might break him temporarily, but it also builds a version of him who will never again hand over his heart without boundaries. In the long run, the very act that destroyed him becomes the foundation of his strength. Yet even after healing, the memory of her cruelty lingers, not because he still wants her, but because the way she left revealed truths about human nature he can never unsee. It showed him how quickly love can vanish, how easily loyalty can fade, how deeply pride can rewrite history. And once you've seen that side of love, you can't return to innocence. You carry the knowledge with you forever. It makes you stronger, yes, but also heavier, because you now understand that the person who swore they'd never hurt you is capable of being crueler than a stranger when it's time to walk away. This realization is why so many men speak with bitterness about women long after their relationships end. It's not always about the fact that she left, it's about how she left. If she had walked away with honesty, compassion, and gentleness, he could have forgiven, but the cruelty, the coldness, the rewriting of history, the indifference etched itself into his memory. It's not the loss of love he can't forgive, it's the way she made him feel disposable. That is what men never forget. And yet, paradoxically, the cruelty also reveals something liberating. Once you've survived it, you fear nothing. A man who has lived through the coldest version of a woman's heart no longer fears rejection, no longer fears abandonment. He knows the worst case scenario because he's already lived it, and that gives him a strange kind of power. He becomes unshakable, less needy, more grounded. The cruelty that was meant to break him becomes the fire that forged him into someone stronger than he ever thought he could be. Over time, he learns to stop seeking answers from her because he realizes her cruelty wasn't a reflection of his worth, but of her choices. It wasn't about what he lacked, it was about what she couldn't give. That clarity takes years to develop, but once it does, he feels freer than ever. He no longer sees himself as a victim of her leaving. He sees himself as a survivor of her cruelty. And survival in this sense is victory. Because no matter how hard she tried to erase him, he endured, and he rebuilt. In the end, the cruelty of a woman leaving is unforgettable, but it's also transformative. It strips away illusions, exposes harsh truths, and teaches lessons no book or mentor ever could. Men who've been through it walk differently. They move with more caution, more strength, more awareness. They no longer live in the fantasy that love guarantees loyalty. They live in reality, where loyalty is rare and must be tested, not assumed. And while the cruelty may haunt them, it also liberates them. Because once you've survived the coldest version of love, you stop begging for warmth. You start building your own fire.